Oh, hello. Uh, Welcome. How you doing? Chin chin. Cheers. Skål. Salute. Comment je va? Bottoms up. So, I was reading this piece the other day, about a week ago now. I've been meaning to do this for about a week, but I didn't know what to say. I knew I wanted to say something. You ever feel like that? Something has been on your mind, and you want to say something about it, but you don't quite know what to say. And as you know, if you're a regular here, don't tend to do too much prep. I kind of just wanted it to. I didn't want it to be too rehearsed. You know. I didn't want it to be like I planned and scripted it all. I wanted it to be off the cuff, like I was just talking to you in a pub, and so I didn't want to overthink this. But I read this article the other day. Let's get it up about this by this journalist. Laura Barton. By Laura Barton. Now, she's a music journalist, and she wrote this piece. It was on the 10th of May in the Independent. I just saw it. It just came up on my timeline, and it's about her talking ostensibly about these 4 new Beatles movies that are coming out, which Sam Mendes is directing. But then she's going on about, I don't really know what she is trying to say here. So help me out. I'm not looking for trouble. Please, I am not looking for trouble here. But I just want to... Also, it's... As I'll explain, if you stay with me, it's part of a bigger thing about men and the Beatles. And, But let's talk about the article first of all. She says that as 3 male writers are announced as the people behind the new 4-part Beatles biopic, she mentions the stars. Laura Barton asks why, despite preparing the band to glory, women are rarely considered an authority on them. And that's true. That is true. I'm not debating that. There aren't many books that I've read. I'm trying to think of the books I've read by women on the Beatles. And the books I've read are by Cynthia Lennon. I remember she wrote a book years ago called Twist of Lennon, and then she wrote this book called John. It's very good, actually. And then I read Julia Baird, John Lennon's half sister. John Lennon, my brother. I think I read the first. I think she's written some other books since then, but I've got the first book that she read. And May Pang, I've read her book about Loving John, which is quite hard to find now, isn't it? As I think I've said before, I don't really read books about the Beatles anymore. I've got a lot that I used to. I've got quite a few that I've up to 2012 when I did a play about Mal Evans. I read a lot of books about the Beatles. I specifically read a lot of books in prep for that. So anyway, I haven't read a book by a female Beatles historian. But that's not because I've not wanted to. There are a few around. I've found out that there's a few people that write about the Beatles since then. There's a woman called Erin Weber. I've seen her before, I think, on one of those YouTube channels. She was talking to somebody. She's written a book or 2 about the Beatles, I think, Erin, but I haven't read it. And there aren't many women doing podcasts, doing YouTube videos, right? There's Abigail. I really like Abigail DeVoe. I really like her sort of her videos. It's not just about the Beatles. It's about a lot of 60s music, 70s, a lot of cool music there. And I do like her enthusiasm. So I like her. And there's a few I can't think of offhand. Others, but I can't think of all the guys that I follow really, apart from Beatle Tone. How are you? To be fair. So anyway, back back to the article. She's saying that I'm a little wary of white men telling us about the Beatles, and I say this as a white woman who actively likes the Beatles and occasionally tolerates men. It's a criticism we could extend to many artists. Whiteness and maleness equality is often shared by the diligent students of Dylan, Springsteen, Cohen, to name but three. But in the case of the Beatles, a band whose early success was so propelled by female support, he feels particularly obnoxious. She seems to change tack in this article and get a little bit nasty, actually. Looking for trouble a bit, provocative. If I was a woman writing about the Beatles and I couldn't get noticed because of men, I'd be like that as well. But is it the case that women can't get noticed because of men? Which, if that's the case, it's publishers at fault, isn't it? Not other men. She could have gone down the route that's actually the fact that more men go to Beatles conventions and talks and are on here. It does seem that men, particularly men of my age, do dominate the scene. And I don't necessarily like that because I don't like sort of male-dominated things anyway. It's nice when you mix it up. I get a bit irritated by other Beatles fans. I mean, you know, they're very pissy about facts. Get a little fact wrong. No, can't get a fact wrong like that. And people sometimes forums on Facebook in the past, and people are a bit pissy. You know, I've not found that with the YouTube community here. Though I found actually, you know, people like Beatle Tone and Beatle Dave and Darby, you know, really supportive and nice. But I've found some Beatle fans in the bigger picture. I'm not talking about YouTube. Can be a bit pissy if you got your facts right, or some, you know, things like that, you know, or competitive. Who knows more and all that sort of stuff. I don't really like that. But why are so many? Why are Beatles events like Beatles conventions and Beatles talks so predominantly men now, and predominantly men my age, sort of middle-aged men? You know. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just curious. It's quite funny, really. You know, I remember going to one of Mark Lewison's. I think it was the one he did about Abbey Road. You know, Hornsey Road. That one. Was that the one you had the zebra crossing? Very good, actually. I remember went to see it in London with Mark. You were there, weren't you, with me? And we were struck by. In the kind of interval beforehand, the line for the guys' toilet was going back there, and the women were just sailing right in. And one woman said to us, "Welcome to our world." It was just emphasizing how many men there were there compared to how few women were there. And I don't necessarily believe that more men like the Beatles now than women necessarily, but I do believe that more men go to gatherings about the Beatles and, you know, buy the records and certainly do YouTube channels. And why is that? Is it the case that men are just better at being nerds than women? I've met a few women who are sort of nerds on, you know, like Star Wars, Star Trek, or something like that. I've been a bit of a nerd about things in the past, I think, you know. But curious, anyway, this article, as I say, she seems to sort of have a bit of a veiled attack on men, really, and not just men, but white men. And then this term crops up through the, which I've never really quite totally understood it. So explain it for me if you want. The male gaze. And she actually says the white male gaze is only from the perspective, something that's only from that perspective of men and white men, you know. So it's the male gaze. Yeah, she goes on about that. And she sort of describes, says that women kind of started things off, which, now, again, was that strictly true? Was it just women at the beginning that propelled the Beatles to fame? Was it just suggesting that men have sort of, it's almost like trying to say that men now are sort of airbrushing women's importance in the role of the Beatles. I don't think anyone's done that. Books I've read about do not belittle the importance of women. Far from it, you know. There's never been a shortage of women who know about the Beatles. The popular depiction of Beetle Mania draws on images from 1960s. Crowds of young women screaming and fainting and waving homemade banners. They're there in front of the rows of concerts, waiting at airports, outside hotels. The understanding of the band, deep, devoted, encyclopedic. At some point in the past 6 days, 6 decades, this has shifted. A portrait of Beetle Mania today might very well show the clutch of white middle-aged men pontificating about the White Album, prowling discogs for rare Japanese pressings of Abbey Road. It's not the love I question, but the presentation, as if this devotion is superior, more respectable, less hysterical for being dressed in cultural theory. This is a bit nasty. It's just sort of slightly malicious. And it's sort of suggesting that, you know, but the presentation as if their devotion is superior. Just because they profess to know more, they're more superior, less, because they're less hysterical. Well, you know, women's adulation of the Beatles was was just hysterical. It was just hormones. And our kind of appreciation of the Beatles is more serious, and we're not into it. Do you know what? I think that, and I'm talking as a heterosexual man, there's an attraction. You know, guys are attracted to men, not in a sexual way, but in a way that's cool, you know, and sometimes in a sort of an admiration way. I'm a bit attracted to Lennon and admiring it without wanting to, you know, fancy it, you know, and I mean, she says here, music critic Jessica Hopper once asked, what might happen if you replace the word fangirl with expert? Subject also brilliantly explored by the Independent's Hannah Ewens in her book Fangirls, which documented the history of female superfans from Beetle maniacs to beliebers, using fandom as a derogatory term, as an example how we make women smaller by diminishing the value of their knowledge, by questioning the nature of their passion, by suggesting their interest might be more sexual than critical. What I don't like about this article is the sort of slightly male bashing, you know, nerds. I mean, and suggesting that somehow men have taken over the agenda and are stopping, you know, and airbrushing women's importance out of the game. And I don't think that's true. I'd be really interested to hear what you think about it, particularly if you're a woman watching this. So yeah, get involved. Please let me know what you think. This article, I'll put a link to it. It's actually, maybe I'll transcribe it because it's behind a paywall, which I managed to get through. So I'll transcribe the whole article to you in the notes here. And I'm looking back, and there are some other articles that have been written, which, again, yeah, was it just women who propelled the Beatles to stardom? It can't have been. There must have been a fair amount of men out there who just kind of fell in love with the Beatles. You know, I think men were attracted to the Beatles in a different way. You know, and I don't think, I've not met anybody, and certainly not me, belittles the importance of women. Just, you know, or says they were only interested in shagging the Beatles, or, you know, that they were. I've not come across that. In all honesty, I've never come across that. You know, I've known a few sort of what you might call sort of chauvinistic types who might have said that. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. Maybe one of my most contentious episodes here at the Mermaid Tavern. This I may get myself in all sorts of trouble because you could be opening a can of worms. But then it'd be interesting. It's good to have a debate, and I don't really know. I don't, particularly when she said it's obnoxious. You know, I mean, Beetle Mania was hysteria, wasn't it? But then there's obsession and hysteria. They're close cousins, aren't they? And, you know, men become the the obsessives. Men have taken over as these sort of obsessives, where women now are not. But I've never really been aware that men have belittled the importance of the female fan originally. You know, you might get an odd person say, "Oh, why were they all screaming and not listening to the music?" It might have had that. But hormones played a huge role in the Beatles, no doubt about it. They would never have been where they are. But it's not true to say just only women bought the records at the beginning. Because the percentage, wasn't it? I tried to look online to find out about this, but I couldn't find it out. Anyway, it's not really that important in the scheme of things. It's just interesting, isn't it? I wish there were more women out there like the Beatles. I've been looking my whole life for her. That consensus that she says that the beginning there were more women like the Beatles and men started liking the Beatles when they got a bit more serious, like Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, White Album. She cites the White Album and that, doesn't she? Again, I can't identify with that. I mean, what do you think? Maybe I'm reading too much in this, but I just found that article a little bit sort of, just a little bit problematic. I didn't really know what she was trying to say. She was trying to say the white gaze, the white male gaze is sort of belittling the importance of women in the history of the Beatles. And I've never found any evidence of that. What is true is, there are more men who go to Beatles conventions, who talks, who buy the records, all these special editions. Why is that? Why aren't there more women who do that? As I say, there are more men out there who are doing this, and women, like the Beatles, but not in that same way. And that's a curious phenomenon. Why that is? Why, why the line for the gents' toilet is when women just sail in. It's funny. It's a curious phenomenon from, apparently all at the beginning, all women, and then now all men. But neither of those two are true. It's just in black and white. And this writer is buying into a black and white argument. She's forgetting the grey areas. She's being, she's not being fair. I don't think it's a fair, or to be honest with you, a particularly serious appraisal of the situation. I do think this Beatles biopic does look a bit dull, though. All the writers are men, so majority of what are they? Oh, Jez Butterworth. He's one of the writers. I didn't know that. Jack Thorne. He's the guy that all that fuss about this adolescence. I still don't see all the fuss about that. That was well acted. She's suggesting it's going to be a bit boring because it's just written by blokes, but then maybe that is a fair thing to say. A female perspective in there, but might have been more interesting. Certainly, I thought Cynthia Lennon's book, John, was great. One of my top 5 favourite books about the Beatles. Definitely. That's it, really. I don't think I've got any more to say on that one, and I'm not sure what I've said anyway. But she's being a bit predictable herself. She's saying how boring and predictable this biopic's going to be, but she's being a bit predictable herself by blaming it all on men. I don't think you can blame it all on men. Much as I can see how men are a bit irritating sometimes, as I said to you about, pissiness of some, nobody on YouTube, but just, everybody I've met on YouTube has been great. But anyway, get involved. Let me know what you think. Is it the case that women's role in the history of the Beatles has been airbrushed, made less important? The white male gaze? Is any of this, really relevant? What do you think? Let me know. Anyway, I've talked for long enough. Bless you. Thanks for listening to me. Will I see you again? Will I see you again? I hope so. Bless you.